I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. What a show we have for you tonight. It's the season of political ads, and if you watch TV at all these days, you've seen plenty, I know. We're going to cover them a lot in the coming weeks. Tonight, we're going to look at how some are trending and answer the question, why do campaigns run these negative ads? It is definitely our big story. Political candidates and their campaigns are doing everything they can right now to get and hold your attention. They want you to believe that they are your best friend. They understand you. They have your best interest in mind at all times. And their opponent? Oh, come on, electing them will bring about the end of the world. Now, whether you're watching me live on KGW or streaming through YouTube, it's nearly impossible to miss the political ads, and of course, that's the idea. Earlier today, KGW aired this ad by a political action committee supporting Democrat Tina Kotek, who's running for governor. It's a twofer, trying to turn you off to both her opponents. It's just one of many that you will see in the weeks and days ahead. Rebecca Tweed says she's a Republican campaign strategist.
Good luck avoiding ads right now. I was watching TV last night and watching football all weekend and saw ad after ad after ad. And of course, I love them. But if I were a regular voter, it would seem like a lot. What's really important here is that the candidates and their campaign strategists try to find a way to make these ads stand out. And that becomes more and more difficult with candidates and campaigns spending more money and being more accessible. I'll be really interested to see the direction some of these advertisements go. You know, do they get more and more negative? Do they get more kitschy? How do they really draw themselves apart?
Well, we do know that answer in a couple of the campaigns. They're getting nasty. Which brings me to an email from viewer Marina, who asks, are there any studies that show whether these negative political advertisements really work? The more vicious the ad, the more I'm inclined to vote for the other candidate. Well, it's an excellent question, Marina, and the answer is yes. Here's a report I found from the University of California in 2019. They cite a professor named Allison Ledgerwood at UC Davis. She studies psychology. She found the framing of an idea or issue, that is the way that it's presented, determines whether you will remember it. Presenting something in a negative frame is more sticky than a positive frame. Our brains just seem to be hardwired to remember negative information. Political operatives know that and sometimes come up with catchy negative phrases to drive their message. This report reminds us there have been many examples through the years. For example, the negative name for President Richard Nixon, remember that one? Tricky Dick. And there are many more examples. Remember death panels? That was the negative term for part of the Affordable Care Act. And President Trump had a long list of names that he loved to use, negative phrases like Crooked Hillary or Lion Ted or fake news. The point is, Marina, even as we work to resist those negative ads, it's hard to get them out of our brain. And that is why the campaigns use them. It's also why you've seen ads from Jamie McLeod Skinner with negative words written on a whiteboard about her opponent, Lori Chavez Demir. She's counting on you remembering those negative words. She wants you to focus so much on it, she never even mentions what specific seat in Congress she's running for or which party she belongs to. By the way, she's a Democrat. She's running for Oregon's 5th congressional district. Which brings up another question from you. Garrett wrote in to ask, why aren't political ads stating their party? Are they ashamed of their party or expecting voter stupidity? Great question, Garrett, and the answer to both is no. Here's Republican strategist Rebecca Tweed again.
Well, when folks get their ballot, you know, they're not reading it position by position as much as they're reading it by name recognition. Right. And so there's sort of two strategies. Is one, make sure that your name is heard the most and the loudest and the most often, so that when people get their ballot in that huge voters pamphlet statement, they just say, oh, well, this is the candidate I've heard the most. I've seen the lawn signs. There's letters to the editor. I met him at the fair.
So there you are. Some candidates want you to remember their name, not so much the party or anything else. And negative ads are used because they work. Whether you like to remember them, whether you want to remember them or not, they're in your brain. Let me know if you have other questions about ads. Send me an email or call our voicemail, 503-226-5090. Well, you've certainly seen ads about Oregon's homeless crisis, especially when it comes to the competitive race for governor. The candidates know that homelessness is a top priority for you voters, and so do we. And that's why our Blair Best is sitting down with each gubernatorial candidate to see how they would handle the crisis if elected. We heard from Republican Christine Drazan yesterday. Tonight, it's Betsy Johnson's turn.
Betsy Johnson, who's running for governor unaffiliated from any party, sees homelessness in Oregon as a humanitarian crisis.
It's a mess. You can't go anywhere in Portland and not see the effects of urban decay here, and it's tragic.
In one of your recent campaign ads, it shows you driving down the street, passing tents on the sidewalk, and I think you say something along the lines of no more tent cities. How do you plan to do that?
Well, there are a variety of different methodologies. First of all, let me say that I think Portland has enabled tent cities, and I sure as hell know that Tina Kotek has enabled tent cities with the legislation that she has championed and pushed through the system. So we need to get the tents off the streets. There are a variety of different methodologies that are being tested right now. And then there are laws about camping in public places. Enforce the law. And that's a City of Portland problem and a City of Portland prerogative, and I think they ought to be much more aggressive about it.
What will you do at the state level to make a difference, say, here on the streets in Portland?
Well, it's not what will I do, what am I doing? Unlike Tina and Christine, I mean, Tina wants to build $400,000 a door apartments and give homeless people a place to live. Christine wants to declare another emergency. Portland has declared homeless emergencies over and over again. It's like declaring a hopeless emergency. All you need to do is look out the window and you know we've got an emergency. So I have never subscribed to having meetings or drawing up 5-year plans. I've actually been doing it. I was part of a group of people who helped repurpose the abandoned Wapato jail, built at huge public expense.
That former jail, now the Bybee Lakes Hope Center, a trauma-informed shelter and transitional housing for the homeless. It also helps homeless people struggling with addiction.
So I don't talk about it, I do it.
So will you allow camping on the sidewalks?
No.
And what will you do to stop that? I mean, there's so many tents out there.
Enforce the law. Find alternative space. Let me give you an example. The Metro Center parking lot. You could establish that alternative space that makes moving people off of the streets legal and acceptable.
The city's talked about doing that very thing at some of the Expo Center parking lots, but ran into resistance, and it's still just an idea. Johnson says she will also work to repeal Measure 110, which voters approved in 2020, decriminalizing personal possession of illegal drugs.
Drugs are at the root of every urban ill, as I see it. They're exacerbating mental illness, certainly the open market drug trafficking that's going on in town.
We have a lack of addiction treatment facilities. What will you do to address that and to expand those services? Well,
a variety of things, none the least of which is let's recognize that those addiction facilities need to be spread all over the state.
You say Oregon needs to build 580,000 new housing units over the next 2 decades to close the housing supply deficit. How do you plan to do that?
Well, one of the things is to reduce the regulatory burden. Affordable housing is not $400,000 a door. And with all of the regulations and the impediments and the paucity of developable land, we are driving the costs per unit through the ceiling. We've got to get realistic about the fact that we have an affordability crisis because we have a supply crisis.
Well, if homelessness is someone's #1 concern going into this election, why should they vote for you?
Well, because I've got a track record. Drive out to Helping Hands and see what's happening out there. If it appears that I take enormous pride in that, it's because I do. We're doing it. We're not talking about it. We're not waiting until housing units are built. We are taking people off the streets and putting them in a setting where they can achieve and maintain their own sobriety with the dignity of work and the investment in their own futures.
We also talked about how she plans to speed up the process when it comes to building affordable housing. You can watch the full interview on our website, along with yesterday's interview with Republican candidate Christine Drazan. Now, next week, we sit down with Democratic candidate Tina Kotek. Blair Best, KGW News.
Up next on The Story.
Everyone who takes pride in living here and being from here should be personally insulted.
Widespread fallout after the release of a months-long investigation that uncovered sexual and emotional abuse within the National Women's Soccer League and the Portland Thorns. calls for owner Merritt Paulson to sell the team are growing, and this afternoon he released a statement that many say falls woefully short. What's new today and how did we get here? When the story returns. Portland is one of the few cities in America where soccer is really a big deal. But throughout the past year, many fans have had a hard time supporting the Portland Timbers and Thorns as scandal after scandal comes out of the club's front office. Now, some of the biggest fan organizations say they've had enough. Both the Timbers Army and the Rose City Riveters are demanding that owner Merritt Paulson sell the team and fire top execs Mike Golub and Gavin Wilkinson. Yesterday, a report looking into allegations of abuse within women's soccer was released, and it revealed major problems within the league, much of it centered around the Portland Thorns and former coach Paul Riley. The report was the result of a huge investigation led by former acting Attorney General Sally Yates, who wrote, "Our investigation has revealed a league in which abuse and misconduct, verbal and emotional abuse and sexual misconduct has become systemic, spanning multiple teams, coaches, and victims." The investigators found a pattern of abuse coming from several prominent coaches, and when claims were reported, according to investigators, the league hardly moved to address them. They wrote, "We heard report after report of relentless, degrading tirades, manipulation that was about power, not improving performance, and retaliation against those who attempted to come forward. Even more disturbing were the stories of sexual misconduct. Players described a pattern of sexually charged comments, unwanted sexual advances, and sexual touching and coercive sexual intercourse." Former Thorns coach Paul Riley was one of a handful of coaches investigators focused on, and they wrote, "Numerous players reported that Paul Riley created a sexualized workplace throughout his tenure in the NWSL. Riley frequently talked with players about sex and encouraged them to do the same." He fixated on players' sexual orientations and targeted players with grooming behavior that included late-night texts, drinking, and flirtatious comments about their appearance. Riley's abusive conduct was considered an open secret, but it never prompted an institutional response. The investigators say the club protected Riley's reputation and blamed the players who brought the allegations against him for putting him in a bad position, and that the Portland Thorns specifically tried to hinder the investigation. They wrote, "The Thorns refused to produce relevant documents for months, making specious arguments that the materials were protected." In addition, the Thorns declined to make Mike Golub, president of the club, available for an interview. The Thorns' lack of cooperation delayed our investigation. The organization that runs the fan groups, the Timber Army and the Rose City Riveters, says they are done until big changes happen. They say that after everything that's gone on in the past year with the teams, they're suspending their relationship with the club until Paulson, Wilkinson, and Golub are gone. So how did we get here? The investigation was commissioned last year after multiple reports described abuse by National Women's Soccer League coaches. It started when The Athletic published an investigation into former Portland Thorns coach Paul Riley. Former Thorns players Sinead Farley and Mana Shim came forward accusing Riley of harassment and sexual coercion.
It's so prevalent. It's not just this team, it's not just this coach. It's across the league, it's across the sport, and we have to do something about it.
Former Thorns player Alex Morgan said players tried to report the abuse, but the National Women's Soccer League, which controls the sport, chose not to investigate.
The barriers were not there, the consequences were not there, and thus it allowed a systemic problem to flourish for years.
Paul Riley's contract with the Thorns ended in 2015, and he went on to coach other teams. The Women's League did not disclose the abuse allegations, and Riley left the Thorns with well wishes. After the investigation, team owner Merritt Paulson published an open letter promising more transparency and that he would take action to protect the players. But just a few months later, Major League Soccer, which controls the men's league, fined the Portland Timbers $25,000. That involved Timbers player Andy Polo, who was accused of domestic violence in May of 2021. The team knew about the allegations, but did not suspend Polo from the team for 9 months and did not report the claim to Major League Soccer. The club said at the time, "We deeply regret not suspending Polo immediately. It was a failure on our part and one that will never happen again." Then, in August of this year, the Oregonian published an investigation into the Timbers and Thorns staff. Former employees say the club was a toxic work environment for women and working mothers. Many of the allegations were against the president of business, Mike Golub.
Physical touching that was unwanted and general workplace behavior that some saw as unprofessional. In particular, we found issues with nursing and working mothers. That was an issue for one employee who said that she was made to pump breast milk in an electrical closet.
Throughout the past year, fans have struggled with how to support the team, with this message for the front office.
We're paying attention. This isn't something that we're going to let up on, and we're going to be looking to hold them accountable.
And that's how we got here. Well, the sports columnist over at the Oregonian, Bill Oram, also had strong messages for the team today. He agrees Merritt Paulson must sell. Oram acknowledges that Paulson built the club into what it is today, but he said that the teams have outgrown him and that in light of everything that's happened in the last year, it's time for Paulson to go. We talked with him this afternoon.
It is really clear that the only solution here is for a clean slate with the Portland Timbers Football Club, and that means firing the people who have been in charge of this club and created a toxic environment. That's obviously that is Gavin Wilkinson and Mike Golub, and then it's Merritt Paulson who allowed all of this to happen under his reign, who worked behind the scenes to keep the allegations out of public view. He needs to sell these teams and get out of Portland, or at least get out of Portland sports, because this is not somebody who is a good steward of Portland sports teams anymore.
Well, Merritt Paulson so far has not announced that he's selling the team. In a statement today, he did say the report was the darkest day he's ever experienced, and he apologized for the failure to protect player safety. He announced that he, Wilkinson, and Golub are removing themselves from Thorns' decision-making for the time being, but not the Timbers. For Oram and for a lot of fans, that does not go nearly far enough.
when you have an executive of a women's professional sports team blaming the victim of alleged sexual misconduct, it just shows the complete disregard and frankly contempt that that executive has for the process of reporting, for the need to have an inclusive and safe workplace for players and for all women of the organizations. It is frankly beyond comprehension to me that Gavin Wilkinson wasn't fired for this 7 years ago or 1 year ago when the allegations first became public. But the fact that that report could come out on Monday morning and we could be sitting here on Tuesday talking about how he's going to continue to show up to work at the Timbers into perpetuity, and he's simply recused from his job at the Thorns until the conclusion of a separate investigation, is just every Portlander, every fan of Portland soccer, everybody who cares about the perception and reputation of our state, everyone who takes pride in living here and being from here should be personally insulted. It is an affront to every single one of us.
Well, the Thorns are about to head off into the NWSL playoffs, and those games may just be a lot quieter and more subdued than they usually are. We're going to keep following this, but we do want to hear from you. Are you going to keep supporting the teams after everything that's happened? Why or why not? Send us an email, please, or leave us a voicemail. Still to come on The Story. People who solicit donations of bodies and then sell them for medical education and research are called body brokers. And it's a business with little federal oversight. But now a former Washington state body broker is heading to prison for what he did to at least 9 bodies 1,300 miles away in Arizona. Details after the break. And now to a story that's certainly not for the faint of heart, and I do want to warn you ahead of time, some of the details are a little gruesome and graphic. We're talking about body brokers here, meaning someone who solicits donations of human bodies, which are then sold for medical education and research. We first told you about this a year ago when a company called Death Science put on a live pay-per-view autopsy at the downtown Portland Marriott. Yep, it really happened. Tickets started at $250. Multnomah County's medical examiner tried to stop the event from happening, calling the police, the county attorney, the Oregon Medical Board, but none of them could step in and stop it. We later learned the family of the man whose body was on display had no idea his remains were being used as part of a live show. They donated his body to science, but the company that took his body never told his family it would be used for that show. Back then, we told you about the lack of regulation for those body brokers. by way of no licensing and few federal laws. Well, now in a separate case with a separate company, jurors have convicted a former Seattle body broker for dumping the remains of people from Washington state in the Arizona desert. 9 donor families thought their loved ones' bodies were being used for science until they learned the truth from investigators about where they really ended up. Chris Engels from our sister station in Seattle reports.
I mean, to this day, I don't get Walter Mitchell. I don't understand him at all. I don't know what was going on in his head that would cause him to do what he did.
Evans Wilson of Edmonds has just learned that the man he entrusted with his deceased mother's body has been convicted of 29 felonies in an Arizona courtroom.
He is going to be held accountable for what he did. Again, why he did it, I have no idea.
There are no clear answers, but a jury found former Seattle body broker Walter Mitchell guilty of dumping the remains of at least 9 Washington donors in Arizona. Mitchell moved there in 2020 after closing his Seattle business that solicited human body donations and sold the cadavers to medical and research facilities.
Did you touch anything?
No, hell no.
How close?
Outdoorsmen found 29 body parts at 2 separate sites near Prescott in December of 2020.
I'm not saying it's a murder. I don't know what happened. You know what I mean?
Bodies usually don't escape.
I'm not saying what happened. So
medical tags on some of the body parts led to Mitchell's Seattle company, Future Genex. DNA tests on the remains later identified victims like Doug Patterson of Camano Island, who died in 2019.
They contacted me and asked for a DNA test.
That test determined that Evan's mother, Maudine Wilson, was not among the remains in the desert.
It's a totally different experience to see the human body in person like that.
Earlier this year, our series of reports exposed a stunning lack of regulation for companies that solicit whole body donations and sell them to medical researchers. There's no licensing and few federal laws. Mitchell's case is only the latest example of the problem, according to critics.
This happens in America, not in a third world country, but that in America, people are able to get donated bodies, cut them up, and sell them off a price list, often on the black market.
Chris tells us that Mitchell was a body broker for decades, and nothing in the law says he can't be one again. He rejected a plea deal a few months ago that would have dismissed 20 of the 29 counts of concealment of a dead body. So now he faces prison time for all 29 counts when he's sentenced. Get this, on Halloween Day. All right, keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. We'll finish up right after this. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for joining and watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.